And welcome to the 23rd Government Operations Committee. We have a packed house, so won't be introducing everybody who's here, but thank y'all for being here. We're going to have a pretty lengthy, pretty good meeting today, but we're going to try to keep it under an hour. And has everyone received the September 18th meeting minutes? And if someone can motion to have those approved. I haven't seen any errors.
Make a motion to approve.
And I second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All righty, welcome everybody. And the September 18, 2023 meeting minutes are approved. Moving on to items of interest. Our last meeting we had talked about our CBAs and our leasing policy, and we have an update from our attorney's office and Mr. Edwards.
Yes, so as y'all know, there's two GOC related items on the agenda. One of them is the extension of the $1 lease for the additional 6 months of this fiscal year. So that's up for a vote at the next voting meeting, the first Tuesday of the month. But for today, staff and the attorney's office, we've brought back follow-up based on y'all's conversation at the last meeting related to leasing. And so one of the items is a document that we emailed y'all, and y'all have the hard copy that our Central Services Director, Andrew Saunders, will go over. And the main follow-up there is y'all asked the question about the maintenance cost based on dollars per square feet of our facilities. And so Andrew will explain that and give you some feedback on that piece. And then I know the attorney's office wanted to speak a little bit about the parameters of what this might look like contractually in the documents that we share with the lessees based on the public good piece of it. So with that, Andrew, you want to kick us off?
Sure. So when we think about the maintenance investments into our facilities, they come in a few different ways. We have direct services that are rendered through landscape and facility maintenance. So that could be everything from a leaking faucet to needing to mulch the beds. Those are covered in columns F and G on the sheet before you. And so those are tracked in our system per project and, labor hours invested and costs, so on. We also have contracted facility costs. So Beth Smith's team maintains a large variety of contracts. That could be things like maintaining fire suppression equipment, elevators, roof inspections, that kind of thing. Not every facility on here has every contract, but across ACC Gov in general, we spend 50 cents per square foot for contracted maintenance of our facilities. And then the last thing I did was we took a 5-year snapshot of our upcoming life cycle expenses. So a look forward, came up with those cumulative costs, and then to come up with average cost, I just took 20% of those plus the other 3 columns. Gives you kind of a blended snapshot of the types of maintenance that we have invested or anticipate investing on an annual basis. One thing to notice is it's highly variable. So if you break these down on a per square foot basis, it could be that you would have some outliers. Some might be particularly high, some might be particularly low, and that could just do with the types of maintenance calls that were received or the capital reinvestments that are happening. But overall, we on average are spending about $5.31 a square foot to provide maintenance to these facilities that are being leased by nonprofits. So that was just something that you all asked for as you considered what, if any, rates you would apply.
Okay, what did I miss? You said you started off with 50 cents per square foot.
Yeah, so that would be column H. So we have, within the facilities maintenance, there's about a third of that budget is dedicated to contract services. So these are usually highly specialized or not the kinds of, maybe there's not enough volume that we would want to have a staff member. So again, fire suppression is a great one. We're not necessarily going to keep a staff member on just to inspect a couple of specialty systems. That's the 50 cents per square foot, but that's only one column. So then you have your direct facility maintenance cost in column G, you have your direct landscape cost in column F, And then if you take 20% of column I, it gives you kind of an annual cost that you might need to budget for upcoming capital.
Okay. So for the team, and thank you, Commissioner Link, for arriving. For the team, the two columns that I noticed were J and K, the average annual cost per facility, and the least amount of what we're charging them for on an annual basis. So now I've stated this publicly, that this the dollar lease to me, even though what happened in the past was not fair, but from the county perspective, we are losing money substantially with the dollar lease. So technically, each of these columns, and I just want to make sure I'm correct on this. So like, it's a dollar lease per month, correct?
No, perhaps the attorney's office would speak to it. The dollar is a bit of a demonstrative gesture, so there's actually no exchange of compensation. It would be, you write it for $1 a year, and nobody ever actually pays us $1, and we don't ask for it.
So like a write-off.
Right.
Yeah.
So, any suggestion, points, or comments?
Last time we met, I still struggle. Well, I guess we'll get back then to then what would be a reasonable charge then to the nonprofit that use our facility then. How do we do that? Along all our nonprofits that using government property. So that's what I struggle with, for me, and that's why I was sort of pushing the dollar thing until we sort of try to figure this out. I know Sherry don't share with us again. We have to get into some legal stuff and all that things, and we sort of bit different, but that's okay. But I understand she's trying to make sure she keep us out of hot water. But at the same time, we got if we're gonna go away from the dollar, so we got to figure out then what, from an equity standpoint, what we charge these nonprofits and use our facility.
So here's and this is what I was struggling with. Like the cottage, I'm not just picking them out. So they're paying $1 rent right now, which is great. The service that they provide to our community is exponentially greater. But if we start charging them rent, you got to look at lines M, N, and O. That's why it's
right. So, give me what impact does that have on those nonprofits that do to start charging some type of monthly fee? Because I'm assuming that after they'll start going monthly, what they would pay. So, I guess us as commissioners, as this group, what are we willing to charge those nonprofits, and what impact it's going to make on those nonprofits? And some of them, we're providing dollars for them already, that perspective. So you can sort of say, well, if we're giving you funding, then you can also say, well, then maybe you can pay a little bit of rent, and what that may look like. So.
And would that be like a conflict of interest if we're funding them and still charging them for rent? And I'm thinking about the East Athens tutorial, because when they send us monthly reports, it's always $3,000. But I see that could possibly be their rent. Yeah. So, and we also fund them.
They have a big funding push this year.
Yes, I don't want to speak out of turn because John is online as well, and I know he's kind of transitioned to taking over a good bit of this work, but it's definitely not a conflict of interest to charge them. I can see why it sort of feels like it may be somewhat purposeless, but interesting. I hadn't realized that we had been charging them $3,480 annually prior to 2019, so they had been paying rent before in terms of Athens tutorial specifically. But that's something for you all to weigh in terms of whether you think it's appropriate, because there are at least some organizations on here that don't receive money from us and some do. I don't know if John wants to weigh in at this point or wait till we have actual questions.
And John, before you
I think you you said pretty much exactly what I would have said in that instance. And sorry I didn't respond sooner. I didn't know if those questions were all being posed at once or if there was anything that we needed to address immediately. I didn't want to jump in, but obviously here to help out however I can with legal questions.
So we're really here because some nonprofits are only paying $1. There's some nonprofit like Athens-Clarke paying $3,000. So that's why I said, how do we balance that now moving forward? So if they was already paying $3,000, which I'm sure they're still already doing, then I guess it's gonna be incumbent upon us to come up with a pay plan or some type of compensation from those nonprofits to reimburse, to pay for rent. And again, I just hope we can be equitable about that based on what those nonprofits do, what they bring to the table for the community. So,
And the attorney's office can share kind of their thoughts. So what Andrew and I have shared with y'all over the last few meetings is, a variety of options. We've talked about the old policy that we actually have never implemented, that we've had on the books for a couple of years. We talked about the weaknesses of that policy. It was very complex. It tried to account for independent agency funding. If they were an independent agency that we gave money to, it would reduce their rent, because we did agree, the GOC back then agreed, that, hey, you're going to give money to somebody, you really take it like that, right? It's kind of, it gets silly if we do that. So the previous GOC agreed with that, but what we created was a little complex. So I think as we've listened to y'all the last couple of meetings, we've heard that you want something more simple. And so that's what we've talked about over the last couple of meetings is, hey, you got some options A, B, and C. B and C were really those flat tiers, right, based on the differences. Option A, I think Commissioner Link and Commissioner Davenport asked about the maintenance costs, and so option A is kind of showing what that would be. But again, is that too high? Likely, right? So what's that right number? And that's really the decision for y'all. I think with that though, if the attorney's office wants to talk about some options, related to the dollar fee, right? So what is that? What is some of those answers to those questions we heard at the last meeting related to options that the GOC has? And I think the thing I would just remind you all is some of these are different than others. And so the tricky part about a dollar fee is who gets a dollar and who doesn't. And we've seen that in the past previously too.
yeah.
That prior formula that we came up with also took into account any revenue that the organization might be taking in. As tutorial isn't necessarily generating revenue, they're having kids learn to read. But if you're a tenant at the Taylor Grady House, you have potential to make significant revenue. So I feel like we still need to take that into account. The potential for these properties to actually generate revenue for whatever entity occupies them.
And Commissioner Link, so the previous policy that was adopted had a kind of a $3,600 threshold, if I recall correctly. Anything above that was a 10% share to the county. Two things, I think you can separate the question if you choose to. So what is a fair rent, and do we do any revenue share on facility rentals? Two things to keep in mind as you ponder that second question. The first is, I think it's upon us to be clear on what facility rental program income is. So for example, I think everybody quickly sees something like the Taylor Grady House or Historic Athens. I know they do some incidental rentals of their facility. That's pretty straightforward. But then how does program revenue from something like Town and Gown or even the Neighborhood Health Center, where you could argue that without the facility, the service does not exist? How do you draw those lines in a way that makes sense? And then the other thing to keep in mind is, from our standpoint, we actually have this embedded in the current lease with the group that's in Taylor Grady. You have to be able to look backwards to know what they were. So it creates some administrative process where they have to routinely be kind of updating you on what their rentals are and then paying you retroactively that profit share. Completely doable, just something that we want to keep in mind, especially for Angel and her time.
Well, if now's a good time for maybe the attorneys to jump in. Shanisi, would you mind unsharing your screen so that they can see John? And I just wanted to share a couple of thoughts because I understand the frustration with giving monies to nonprofits and then asking them to pay money back. I think one way you could choose though to recharacterize that is that we are actually already dramatically subsidizing these rents under what would normally be market rate. So in other words, what we're basically doing is giving them the use of the property for basically an 80% or 90%, 75% discount. So they're only being asked to pay something maybe related to costs. And so it's a little bit of a different concept because there's still a huge savings for the nonprofit if they had to go out and get a market rate space. But I think John was going to chat a little bit more about that subsidy and how we justify that. But I don't want to speak out of turn.
Yeah, sure. No, those are good points, Sherry. I guess one other thing, and I know this is a difficult discussion for a lot of reasons, but I do think, one thing that I think I've picked up, just kind of a consensus from some of the discussion that I've heard, is there is value in the services that these organizations present to the community, and we see a public benefit from that. And so, I think one thing, regardless of whatever sort of pricing model comes out of this body, I think one thing that we want to make sure that we do in our contract document is say either in a background section or a recital section in our leases going forward, whether it's $1 or some other formula that maybe we're able to come up with out of this body, is just to make sure that we're stating what that public benefit is, what those services are that are benefiting the community, and make that clear in the lease document itself, because that obviously is part of the justification, to Sherry's point, of offering some subsidization of the lease, understanding that they're providing something back to the community in terms of a public benefit. So I think that's one thing, regardless of which way we go, is an important aspect of this that we want to make sure that we're able to articulate for each one of these leases.
So could we do, to John's point, based on what each nonprofit provide, could we do a percentage? Or say, based on what they do, and again, I'm not sure what that look like, but say, right now, the Astor Tour is paying $3,000 a month. Say we cut down ahead to 1,500 a month. Again, I don't know, I'm just asking. I sort of asked the question. Can we do a percentage?
Maybe your question is whether for contracts or leases where we see a public benefit, let's say that we want to go with something based upon the cost to the government of maintaining the building, maybe assess as a lease payment some percentage of that, and we say, well, we're kind of, for lack of a better term, making up the rest of that percentage because they're providing a public benefit, something along those lines, maybe where there's a formula for that. Is that kind of?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, great. Yeah, that's sort of my thought of it. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Obviously staff, I don't want to get ahead of staff in terms of determining a formula or anything like that, or this body, but that's certainly something you could consider. Just in terms of being able to apply it, the simpler the better. So maybe, there's some value in saying, well, if somebody is providing a public benefit and we're going to do a less than market rate lease, it's going to be the maintenance cost times some factor for everybody, just to make sure that it's easier. But I don't know that that's the best way to do it from a policy standpoint, but that's maybe one thing you can consider.
Can I ask a question to Angel? Is that feasible? Is that manageable? No.
I don't know how you're going to determine, if the public benefit is good enough. Is it equal? Because it's not going to be equal. Everyone's not going to provide the same amount of public benefit. I guess if that's not important, if they provide a public benefit at all and you want to give them that discount, that's fine. I don't see why it couldn't be done, but
I like Commissioner Link's point though. What we could do, again, I've said this a lot when I was at the school district. If if they're generating revenue for their organization, could we sort of balance that out a little bit then? Like Taylor Great House, they use that for weddings and for a number of things. Town and gown, they may do plays and they may charge people to come in. I know the neighborhood health center, people pay on a sliding scale and also the benefits. So all our nonprofits in my mind probably provide a public benefit.
Mhm.
I get that. But again, some of the public, like Ashland don't charge those kids anything. They come free of charge. So how do we look at ones that do charge, some fees coming to a play or whatever they come to see? We sort of do those for like slide scale and take a look at it from that perspective again.
So, and I think this is where we landed last time, right? So we created this community benefit agreement as part of the policy that we haven't implemented, but the attorney's office saw that and thought we needed to improve it. So that's why we kind of came back here. I think it really isn't something that staff can do to determine a public benefit. I think it's going to be up to the mayor and commission. And so I think thinking about what y'all want to see in our facilities might be the way to do this. And so let's just think of if this list wasn't in front of us and we knew we had a certain number of facilities, how would y'all prioritize those facilities? If you had the opportunity to put new nonprofits or anybody into those facilities, how would you prioritize it? And I think if we can kind of get to those priorities, then we could potentially create criteria that y'all can use. Because the only other way to do it would be to go on an individual basis. So with Taylor Grady, we just approved a lease, and was it $5,000 and revenue sharing?
Correct.
And so Taylor Grady's done for the next 3 years, and so we could go individually too, because.
Josh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think individually, because if we take into account, revenue and community benefit, they all differ in ways. And so to Angel's point, it won't be equal. So I think taking each one of them individually and taking into account revenue as well as community benefit, I think it'll probably be longer, but I think it'll be more efficient.
I just think that CBA is the one that keeps throwing me off. Am I the only one? The community benefits agreement that we agreed upon 2 years ago, was it? Last year or something.
But let me ask you, would you say that all these nonprofits that's out here provide community benefits?
Legally, yes.
We started that, so that was part of the process where each of these leases would have to fill out the paperwork.
Yeah.
That comes in front of y'all. But the problem was they filled it out themselves and the criteria was a little loose, right? So
Yeah.
if you're more direct in what you're looking for, then we can be more direct, I think, in what I'm hearing in the attorney's office in describing the community benefit on an individual basis or the public benefit.
Right.
But to Commissioner's point, Mr. Taylor, it might be easier to do that on an individual basis. If Athens Tutorial provides this benefit, it'll just have to be very scripted. And I think maybe that's where the attorney's office helps.
And if I could just share, I think there's two thoughts about that. One, just to start with, is I think there are kind of two types of nonprofits on here that, that make some sense in terms of what we've been talking about, in the sense of some that provide clear direct services for free, others that provide some kind of service, but there's some income that comes in. I think that the Hancock Community Development Corporation that does reverse mortgages is sort of its own unique entity that might be difficult to think about how you capture the concept of community benefit in that concept. So I just wanted to point that out. But to what you were just talking about, Commissioner Taylor, I think a concern is that if we go to something that's individualized, there's a risk that it then becomes arbitrary or appears arbitrary. And then we have potentially the same situation where we have before, where some pay $1 or something small, some pay a larger amount. And then there's a question of how did that decision happen? So that's why I think everyone was interested in a more uniform approach so that there would be clear equity across all of the nonprofits involved.
Well, since EADC and the Merriam-Webster Center and Hancock Community Development, since they do kind of the same work, could we like kind of put them together as far as how much we charge? Because they do the same work, right? They both do, or
Yes, so
is it just, am I being repetitive? I'm sorry.
No. I really don't know enough about what the Hancock Community Development Corporation does personally.
They have.
So if you have if you do categories, right? Because you do that as a category, you do youth development as a category, because that's something y'all talk a lot about. And you could do, I don't know what Taylor Grady and Town of Gowan would fall under, but that could be a category too, or it could be revenue. So I think those are some good options, right? Come up with categories, and then we can work with the attorney's office to put in what would be different in the formula for the lease based on what category it is, right? So that would be a policy that provides latitude based on the category of nonprofit for y'all. Yes.
Can I ask, what are we hoping to accomplish here? Like, I hear some discussion maybe about value to the community and community services rendered, and, a sense of like, well, it seems like they shouldn't pay market rent. I think there's probably broad consensus in this room on that. But if we come up with this mechanism that tries to document these, what would the end product look like for you all that if you saw it, you're like, yeah, this is it. This is something I'm comfortable advocating to my constituents.
So for me, and that's a good question. For me, it is something equitable that these nonprofits are paying in rent, that it's offsetting the cost that we are paying to keep the facility maintained. And if anybody else got,
I'm kind of on that same page too. And for me, the crux is, some of these nonprofits might be pulling in revenue, but it also might be revenue that helps offset the cost of their operation, like Town and Gown charges ticket costs, and it costs a lot of money to put on a play. Not to mention all the cost of, production costs and keeping up the theater. So, and same thing with Taylor Grady, keeping up a facility like that is very costly. And they do have the potential to bring in lots and lots of revenue, but, most of it's probably going back into the house. I know all these nonprofits have to file tax reports that kind of calculate the revenue over operational costs, right? Is that how it?
Sort of. So, because we've actually looked at a number of IRS returns for these organizations to understand. And you got to remember, not every organization will actually be required to file a return. So, for example, Athens Tutorial, I think, has such little revenue that they historically don't have to report. I think if you get into revenue share, the question becomes, well, how might I, if I'm a tenant, reinvent that to tell you that it's not a facility rental fee? So for example, if I am operating, let's go with the historic fire hall, and right now there's I think they charge like a pretty modest fee, maybe $100 or something to use their common area. Well, that could accumulate. Let's say it becomes very popular. And then I find out that I'm asked to share with the government. Well, I might say, well, actually, that's not a rental fee. Those are in-kind contributions in support of our next event. And we just prioritize, you could start to play with the accounting in a way that I don't think we want to be their accountants or their auditors, because then again, we're being asked to kind of call balls and strikes.
Yeah.
And it's based even on my experience with HCD. It's never a pleasant adventure to try to do that with people that are doing good work in the community. So I think if we were, if the intention is to look at revenues, maybe we take some time between this and the next meeting, work with the attorney's office to say, like, what would be a clear definition that is enforceable? Is it something that if there's a contract, that's revenue? If it's maybe it's a duration of time that it's being used, or whether or not it's being used by the entity itself or by a third party. Try to draw those lines more clearly and then just say, yes, this applies to everybody. But I think some of the discussion around community benefits should actually be captured in whether or not you're a tenant, right? Because if you're not delivering community benefits to our community, why are you in a public space? Why aren't you a for-profit or doing your own thing like many other nonprofits do in our community? And so maybe that test actually comes with whether or not the Mayor and Commission chooses to renew a lease. Because what I heard from the attorney's office is kind of, for any approach that doesn't include market rents, that they would want some recitals at the beginning articulating these are the benefits that will be provided. So that can kind of give the commission a true false test to say, like, well, these aren't benefits in my district. I don't see value in this, and I would actually like us to consider releasing it or going a different direction. Because once you pass that test, then I think it's just a matter of, is the rent $1? Is the rent $100? Is it, whatever rates you all might decide on. So I don't know if I brought you clarity to that or not.
You did. I really think it's still just that we need to revisit the CBA.
We can't keep kicking the can down the road.
Yeah.
So we got to cover some type of decision on these things for, Let me ask you this, Andrew, is it, I'm getting back to what we're, looking at red, what we're spending on the cost of the building. And all this in red, right? So, again, and I know I mentioned this, and I think I kind of shot it down, but is there any way we can do a percentage of the what it would cost enough? Can we do a percentage? So I'll say, okay, nonprofit, this is what we're paying maintenance costs. Can we do a percentage of that? And I'm not sure what that percentage might look like. And would that be fair?
I mean, I think we could track previous costs and do some ratio of that is almost a demonstrative cost recovery, right? Of saying there is a fee that comes with the privilege of using a publicly maintained space, but it's not 100%. If you go that route, we can track it internally. We've already done this. We could just update it and make it part of the budget. What I would suggest is that it be what I brought you today, the 531, which I think everybody would look at that column and say, this is probably more than we're comfortable charging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think it would be best if we blended it across all the users. And that way we don't create an incentive for any one user to try to not request maintenance and get by with the minimum because they need their rent to be lower, but it becomes a little bit more of a kind of a self-insurance pool, so to speak. The benefit of that is then over time, those rates would slowly go up, and whatever ratio you all would like, could easily be derived from that sheet.
What's up, thing?
Well, I think so I came in supporting B, but then the more I started thinking about it, I was like, that's why I like the open discussion. But
we got to consistent on that. I'm not hanging down on the fence on this thing. I'm just trying to talk to general. I think B is a good alternative. Then I can live with it too.
From staff standpoint, B or C are certainly the easiest and cleanest.
Yeah.
And again, those values can be adjusted to whatever seems to look right. And what's shown on there is annual compensation, not monthly.
And, it's a side comment, like, if any of these nonprofit has a burden, see it as a burden, they're gonna have some time to adjust. But also, they're gonna come to us for a budget in May, March, whenever.
Right. That's for more money.
Ask for more money. So,
And I can go with B. I mean, B is not, it's not a bad option, but, I'm just trying to come up with some ideas. But B wouldn't be a bad option.
someone make a motion.
I make a motion that we pass B.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Yeah.
Moving on to, okay, so the next, thank y'all. I'm sorry.
Same thing, I was like, I can look with my head.
I'll try.
But I'm really bad with names, so sometimes I'm like.
Especially good.
And I was thinking.
The next big topic, we probably take the rest of our time. We probably won't be able to get to, the facilities. But, I would like to kick it off to Josh or to Ms. Spratling.
Yeah, so, we're thankful that Ms. Jean is here, to talk VACs, with the GMC. And so today, as we dig into VACs, we really wanted Jean to have time, our clerk, to share with y'all kind of what she's learned, and really focus on kind of the early part of the process. So if we think about VACs as a continuum, we're going to talk about the current VACs, and we're going to talk about how we train our members, but let's think about today about the beginning of it, the application period, y'all's interview process with future VAC members, and then kind of where it goes from there. So that's where Gina's going to start today. And we wanted to give her time to share everything she's learned over the years related to VACs.
Give my hands in those things.
Yeah, please ask me any questions y'all have if she shared.
Thank you for the opportunity to share. I know this is a very important process. It takes a lot of your time and certainly a lot of staff time too. And everybody says they want to make some changes, but nobody ever knows what a change is, what needs to be. So if it's okay, I'm just going to hit the highlights like the work session and then come back and discuss items as you see fit. But limit applications to one VAC. And you can help us by responding when we send out interview choices for you to select the 5 that you want to interview. I always get responses from everybody. Attend interview sessions. I always have about 10 interview sessions. I think we need to adopt a policy unless required by legislation. No agency employee can serve on the VAC. We need to adopt an attendance policy. This is something that's been needed quite a while, and they discuss eligible incumbents, review committee, and be reluctant to establish new VACs. Allow VACs without direct effect on agency activities to swiftly make recommendations. Ensure equal representation. Don't think you have to appoint like-minded persons. Require training, which is readily available. Recognize and appreciate the staff time effort VACs require. And this is my personal note, require applicants to be registered voters. At one time we had that was removed several years ago, and I think that's very important. We continue the current process and make no adjustments. Those are some highlights. So anything you want to talk about, questions about all?
So, thank you, Ms. Jean. She sent me, there's a sheet that we have that if you guys can send out to, I don't know if we got this at our last meeting. Did we get the number? We did, never mind. I remember, our office, I forget names of that. He said that to us. Jeff Montgomery. Okay, he's right there. It's Monday, I'm telling you. So he gave us a list of the amount of BACs we have, which is very impressive. Some are state required, some are created by an ordinance, and some are created by the mayor. Can you go over those differences, Ms. Jean? those that are created by the state, those.
Yeah, some are required by state, like hospital authority or things of that nature, Board of Health, Board of Tax Assessors. Some of these are by local ordinance or local legislation, like the Classic Zone Authority. Some, like Development Authority, we create those by local ordinance. DFACS, that's state requirement. So then you've got others which are strictly commission, like Keep ACC Beautiful, Greenway Commission, Florida Policy Committee, GLC, LRC, Property Committee, Prosperity Committee, that's just a few of them. Then you've got your advisory committees. And then you've got others that like Housing Authority, Justice and Memory Project, Audit Committee, DCP Board, EMS. I think it's about 60 something, didn't we say, Jeff, that by the time you put them all together?
Yes, I believe that's right.
But the state ones, we cannot change,
We
correct?
cannot,
Yes. So, so that was trying to get at. So the ones that we can change are the ones that the mayor commission creates and the one by ordinance, but when requiring an ordinance change. We have to change it to like, to make a adjustment, we have to, like, change the ordinance that we created, like, Peace God. Okay. So just want to put that on everybody's table. If we do make any adjustments, some can't be eliminated, some can't be combined, or some can't be changed. If it could be changed, it has to be through an ordinance or from us. So, all right.
My question is, do we feel we have too many DAC?
yes.
I mean, I'd love to look at some of the ones that we created and see if some of them can be combined, like Basically Beautiful and the Solid Waste.
Yeah.
Like those seem to be in the same realm and, you know, they possibly could be combined. There's some of these ones that were formed, you know, years ago to meet a specific purpose that might have, you know, morphed or kind of dissipated at this point. Yeah, I mean, I think that we could look at combining some of them or renaming some of them,
Okay.
you know, giving them new expanded missions that would allow us to eliminate some.
And what about like the process? I do agree that limit. So I'm just throwing a whole bunch of stuff out there so we think about it. So if I'm forced to come on the stop process work, but like, so I agree that we should have that when it comes to one applicant, it should be one applicant only apply to one position. We've been lackadaisical in the past when it comes to like, even when it comes to like 3 people applying for, well, 1 person applying for 3 positions. Confusing because sometimes GLC have one of the applicants and then LRC has one of the applicants. We don't know how that application process went through. So I think that's a quick, easy change, but you know, that's up to.
Well, one thing what we could do on our application process is to require our citizens to only apply, say we got 5 open, you only apply for one of those 5.
Yeah.
Maybe in our wording, we can share if we can do that. I'm not sure that legally that we got 5 openings, right? Say we got 5 open, and what we put out an announcement that you can only eligible to apply for one of the openings. That will cut down on people doing multiple. If we can put that in our wording.
Or if it's feasible, if residents would like to apply for one, for multiple VACs, you could, we could begin to ask them which is more important to this from, you know, most important to least. It'll also, I feel like, give other applicants as well, the opportunity to see which ones, our residents are more favorable in serving on and which ones they're not necessarily, interested in serving on. If that makes sense. I'm trying to say what I'm.
And you got it.
But that's what I'm saying, though. Pick one though. Just, you know, if you're a resident, you look at, we got 5 openings.
Right.
It's okay. And we could say now, like, what pick, whatever your 5, whatever one is, pick the top one. that we consider.
They want to know how to sell.
But think about the process. So like if LRC, how we have it set up, you know, we start at January 12th and we go till 7 or 8. That's a long day, y'all. That's a very long day. So we need to discuss that as well. So let's say Melissa Link, Commissioner Link is applying for DFACs. And she also applied for the Vision Committee. LRC has a Vision Committee. GOC has the DFACs Commission. So we don't see if she attends the DFACs with LRC and the GOC don't see her, but she's applied for, so we missed that interview. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
So that's the problem that I've been seeing, that like we have multiple applicants who apply, but when it comes to the interviewing process, they're not there.
Because they apply for multiple.
Yeah.
That's why I said you pick one. We got 5. Okay. We got 5. Which one of these 5?
Is your problem?
No, but yeah, let's pick one. Okay, you can't, and we can say, you know, you can't pick no more than one.
Okay.
I like this idea because we give people opportunities. I mean, they have multi-interest. I get that, but it's gonna cut down on our process and people getting into both interviews. I think it's better to say, okay, we got 5 open, pick one, whatever.
So here's another issue. I like to think this thing through. So sometimes we have positions that have 3 positions open. 2 people apply, 1 person was not there for the interview. I got it right. So yeah.
2 people, only 1 showed up.
Yeah, 1 showed up. So automatically that person who applied who didn't show up gets that position. I don't think that's fair.
What?
We get eliminated. They get eliminated.
That's
If they
not.
don't show up, they get eliminated. They don't show up for the interview.
Mm.
What you saying? You saying that they don't show up for the interview, they still should be considered?
You know, what I'm saying is I've seen it where people got considered who didn't show up to the meeting. Even though that, well, even people who applied for multiple positions were considered because there were other vacancies. So they may not have gotten their top one, but they got selected for another position, even though they may not have been in an interview. Yeah.
Yeah, that applies time. We have a lot of people who did not apply, so I think Mayor contacted some of these people, so they've been interested in the position. That's happened. Yeah.
Yeah.
Another problem is when you interview choices, according to the rules, you're supposed to not rank, but select 5 for interviews.
Mm-hmm.
If you have 3 vacancies, you only have 5 people, that limits who you can put in each of those. Right. So I think that needs to be revised so that you can perhaps adjust per vacancy. If you got, say, 5 vacancies, then 3, that's 15, a lot of people, but at least give out the opportunity.
Y'all get it? Okay.
I'm totally confused, but that's okay.
So I'm looking at the sheet. What does the tier and category mean in the sheet? Did I miss something?
No, it's on that. Click on that. At the bottom.
Oh, okay.
So the category is the tier is not, this was sort of a version of the one that we had gotten last time. But the tiers are the ones that basically are primarily, at least like tier 1 are the ones, and honestly, I should have sorted this by tier as well as category, but I sort of forgot I had made this until right before the meeting as a secondary one. But the tiers, tier 1 are sort of the state related ones, and the ones that are outside of the category. So that you'll see like the authorities are all kind of tier 1.
So some we cannot change, and then the rest are ordinance or just the mayor dissolving or changing or the commission.
Yeah, well, and some of them are committees that are just appointed by the mayor or directly by the commission.
Yeah.
Each asked to appoint a committee member. So I feel like those should be pulled out. The ones that are, and we should just look at ones that are where there's an interview process involved.
Like we got an offer advisory committee for behind the offer now doing business development and workforce. Those don't go away. So, you know, I guess all the offer ones, yeah, and the probably
Well, and this prosperity committee too, like, I feel like that, because we changed the prosperity package
Yeah,
when the pandemic hit and
and that's dissolved.
pivoted, so I feel like, and it was initially we used it to spend CARES money, but that's all gone away, and now we're focusing on these ARPA.
The only thing is you don't have a charge and you have a committee, so each committee have a charge, it should also have a sunset provision. So they're not on there in perpetuity. And we don't have that on a lot of these, so they just hang around. Although not be active, they're still there.
And let me too, just clarify, I totally understand where this list kind of combines a number of different processes-based ones. I think part of what we've been trying to do on kind of the staff end is also illustrate that from our standpoint, we don't treat them any separately in terms of the staff time, and all of them are, and how they get, streamed in a lot of cases, and the minutes agendas, the requirements for a lot of these are very similar. And so this is kind of capturing it all, understanding that, yes, all of the ones that are category D, those are all mayor appointed. We kind of understand that. So this is a little more information, I understand, than what you might be thinking. But when we've been trying to get our hands around BACs as a whole, because we treat them so similar regardless of their category from the staff side of things, that's part of the challenge. So I do apologize for not having just kind of some of the ones that you all interview on here. But we also want to make you all aware, understand all of this as well.
And so, just to follow up on that, one of the things we're going to bring next time, we did a survey of our staff who support all these BACs. And so for us, it is the ones you engage with, Commissioner, in terms of interviews, but our staff are supporting all of them. And so we want to make sure we have this comprehensive list because the workload that's represented here. And then the category 3 is related to those that are much more of a specific charge with a clear beginning and end. And so in some of these cases, these have ended. We still have them on the books, but we've ended the cleaner renewable energy more because the mayor charged them with helping to create the cleaner renewable energy focus that y'all approved and accepted. The solid waste and the stormwater advisory committee is another example. They have a clear beginning and end with a charge. They need to begin and they need to end, and then we need to take them off the books. In some cases, we haven't done that, where some of these were created not by ordinance, but by charge, and are acting like they are created by ordinance. And that's an opportunity to clean these up, because those are ones that conceivably could go away, and we're never meant to be here forever. So there are some of those, but I would say we still want to focus on those that were given charge and are appointed by the mayor, because they're still generating a lot of staff workload, and might not be things we have to be doing.
The generated workload also, they have to follow the Open Meetings and Open Records Act, whether you're a committee or a BAC or whatever you are. And that's very important. Sometimes it's hard to get people to understand that. That's why we need to require all of them to do this training, which Sherry and Lisa worked up about a year or so ago. They're not taking advantage of that. That's very important. And you think about interviews. I suggested here we have a review committee to look at some of these and pull them out before you actually do the interviews, but also to have some like the library board, the health department, DFACS, Region 2 Behavioral. Let them make recommendations to y'all as opposed to taking the applications yourself. And the reason I say that, when DFACS comes in, there's certain requirements, there's certain health department requirements, certain Region 2. I send those applications to those directors, and I ask them to review those and tell me who qualifies, who doesn't. If somebody does not qualify, y'all interview those people. So basically, they're selecting the ones to be interviewed in advance. So that would eliminate y'all having to interview some of those. That's just a thought.
That's a good idea.
And also, I guess the only other thing is, how do we automate this to make it simple? How can we eliminate some of the paper?
Well, that's the thing. I'm certain that there's technological answers to the bureaucracy and paperwork. Where, there could be online forms that automatically sort and automatically come up with a schedule. I
Need applications for
yeah, and a portal, instead of all this email and back and forth of applications and logging into the VPN to find stuff. And I feel like that if there were a portal that we could access, it would be a lot easier than digging stuff out of email.
And would the portal just be for the VACs that come before the Mayor Commission, or would the portal also include the entities that Miss Jean was just saying she would ask for a referral and an interview process with them before it comes to us? Because I feel like that has to be solidified as well. Because I think what Miss Jean said was a really good idea.
So when it comes to a portal, though, you got to think technology and expense. You might have to design that, create it.
I mean, I'm wondering if there's something out there. Jeff, are you aware of anything?
Well, I mean, so we database all the applications that come in. That's already done online. That's been done online for a long time. As far as, the attachments and the different things like that. Ultimately, what you're really talking about is a location, it seems to me, a location where you can go and you can look at a package of the information about each of your candidates, more or less, right? I mean, that's essentially what you're asking about, right? Because the scheduling, you all have, that has to be done more or less manually based on your all's schedules and the days involved.
Mm-hmm.
So all I think you're really talking about is a packet somewhere where you can look online rather than getting it on an email, right?
Yeah.
So the FTP site usually.
Yeah, so we have the capabilities of that. That's not a
I don't see the problem how we getting information y'all right now. You may not agree, but I think it's pretty efficient for us how we process this and get it to you. My problem is having y'all respond to it sometime. People will not respond. 5 people out of 10 will say, let's interview so-and-so. The other 5 say, I want to do so-and-so after the deadline. So that creates a problem when everybody doesn't respond. And then with the interview process, if only 2 commissioners show up, I thought the Mayor Commissioner was going to interview me. How come just 2 of you showed up? That creates a problem too. So that's something we need to think about.
So you're speaking to how y'all determine finalists for interviews? Is that
Profit, yeah.
okay?
But somehow, I adopted attendance policy. I think this is very important. Y'all need to consider this. If you miss 3 consecutive meetings or 3 out of 6, you're automatically removed. One of our problems with some of the BACs is people do not attend. We've had where people attend 1 meeting, didn't come back. We've had some where people missed 6 months, just didn't show up. It's very important. But if staff has to work on this, if the mission's got to be accomplished, you got to have your people there. So they need to adopt attendance policy for everybody. That's my thought. That's been mentioned by several departments.
So administratively, so what I'm hearing, limit application to 1 BACs, the adopt attendance policy, what else? A review committee of the 3 above mentioned could, we're having something like the DFACS board, they make a recommendation to us, like the hospital board does. Those types of changes, does that require an ordinance change for each of the BACs potentially, or?
So I would suggest, and obviously John can chime in as well, but I think the cleanest thing to do would be to have an ordinance that's applicable to BACs. Now, obviously, like there are BACs that even though we created them or the commission created them, that they have their own independent authority. Well, sort of once they're formed, like Classic Center, like we don't have any authority to tell them per se what to do. But I think having an ordinance that clearly sets out those expectations would be helpful. And of course, the mayor appoints some, so, but he could certainly, I want to talk to John more about this, but certainly the mayor could indicate that he is also following the ordinance for his appointees as well. I don't know, John, do you have any thoughts?
No, that Sherry was one of the things that I think is a good thing to mention about having, so again, to go back to some of what staff has explained with the different tiers of BACs, there are certain boards, authorities, and commissions that, those are governed by state law or local legislation. And so, there's not necessarily as much leeway to determine, what to do with their members if people aren't showing up, things like that. State law addresses that, or the local legislation addresses that. But for a lot of the BACs that are created by ordinance, You know, there may be some wisdom in having across the board policies like an attendance policy, like some of these other things that are adopted in one ordinance that's codified somewhere in the code of Athens-Clarke County. I would imagine probably Title I, but I mean, you know, it could be anywhere really. That just kind of sets all that forth. So that way there's consistency across the board. It's much easier for you all as elected officials, much easier for staff, and also for the members of the boards, authorities, and commissions to understand what their responsibilities are in regard to some of those things. I think that would be helpful as we go through this process.
A question. So if we do a broad ordinance in Title I, will we have to go back and correct some of the BACs that we created in the past, or would those be grandfathered, or how does that work?
Commissioner, I think we ultimately would, but I think we could maybe initially draft some language in the ordinance that says, hey, this is meant to, and this isn't the legal language I'd use, obviously, but to apply across the board to these boards, authorities, and commissions that were created by ordinance. I think we could do that, but eventually we probably want to go through and maybe do some cross references or things like that. That's just an initial thought. Sherry, you may have a different thought or a better thought than that.
No, I think that's exactly right. And I do want to, obviously I'm here as the attorney, not as someone to speak about policy, but I do think there are some legitimate legal concerns about the fact that a lot of the BACs that should have been created by ordinance haven't been, and that a lot of the ordinances, the charges are not clear, or they don't really match what the BAC is currently doing. So I think there's some serious value in an independent review of the vast, if not majority, if not all of the BACs to update to make sure, one, there is an ordinance if there should be one, and to update it or to revise it.
And to echo, I'm sorry, Commissioner, I didn't mean to speak over you there.
Oh, yeah.
How would we go about that process, Sherry?
Yeah.
I think it could be part of this charge. I mean, for this body to take up, say, 5 or 3 BACs a meeting, there's plenty of procedural ways to do it. I think I'd defer to the manager's office.
And so Sherry and I have done this together on other committees individually. So we did this with Suki on the Solid Waste Advisory Committee because originally it wasn't an ordinance and now it is. So we did that individually. AIM came forward to y'all through the agenda process the other week as well. And so we're happy to take a few and show you as examples for the next meeting, maybe, to kind of show what it would look like, and then think about as staff what we can do. But it is going to be incumbent on the attorney's office to help kind of clarify what needs to be fixed in those. But we could do a couple as an example for next meeting, maybe.
Okay, because if it's not going to be too much, because we knew, me and Commissioner Fisher, so you know.
Well, we know they need to be cleaned up, so we're happy to do it. Totally. Yeah.
So speaking of cleaning up, so I'm looking at our different categories. So we got some that's E, and we got that's inactive.
Yeah.
And we just automatically scratch those. I don't know from a legal standpoint, but we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that's inactive. It's E and inactive. And we automatically just scrap.
It depends how that was created.
Yep.
So one got manager's office, some of the research, some of the Splosh. They got Splosh advertising advisory committee, then T-Splosh advertising committee. Then I know there's some T-Splosh committees out there for layout, so I don't know exactly what those mean.
So I can tell you it's sort of on the E to some degree. Like the SPLOST and T-SPLOST advisory committees, we kind of left on here at the moment, knowing that they're defunct for a little while, kind of like the Overview Commission. But they still will exist, and they will sort of return at some point because when the next T-SPLOST comes up, that's going to be likely something that would be added. Whereas the 100% Clean and Renewable Energy Board and the Police Advisory Board Development Task Force, for example, I mean, functionally they don't exist. They're kind of on here for our purposes, but they were never made really as a by ordinance anyway. So
we kind of just take them off hand.
There's one of the Commission on People with Disabilities is actually one we probably need to talk about in this group, because it is an important BAC that was created by ordinance, so it would take commission action to remove it. And part of the reason it's important is it's in our ADA transition plan. It's referenced as a requirement. Maybe that could be transitioned to HRC. Like I'm not prepared to speak on that today. But that is one that has been defunct, but probably really shouldn't be the way that things are currently set up. It unfortunately requires like 30 people. So it's just a massive BAC that,
Yes.
yes.
The way it's written now, but
That
again,
could be changed.
Revised.
wow.
30 people.
But the process of eliminating those defunct committees that the mayor created, he could just, at the next meeting, those that were designed by ordinance, it has to be approved by the full mayor commission. Okay.
And that's only the one of those ones at the end under E.
Mhm.
And just for a reference too, I did kind of a quick count, and your category A and B ones, which are the ones that essentially like you either interview or get ones that are recommended.
Right.
That's a total of 28.
28.
Wow.
And a number of those again are state, so they wouldn't be ones that we would do as an ordinance anyway. So it's not a tremendous number, I think that, and we've been trying to track that, I will say, to our.
Jeff, can you, in any way, Dane, I know you do a great job with this. Can we like put it, like state that we know we gotta have, put any category, and just we won't really have to worry about that? I get a trying
Sure.
to cut. So
Yes.
you know, phone case like that. This is state, we gotta have this. It's required. And we won't worry about it.
Yeah, we can sort this in a lot of different ways. And again, I'm sorry, I just kind of remembered real quick that I even had this and thought I'd print it out to bring it because I thought it may be helpful, but we certainly can divide it up much better in a way
Then
that.
we start thinking about, then if we can do that, then we kind of got an idea, okay, we know we got the idea, then we put that process together. Then the other one, then we can look at what can we eliminate if we can. If it's an ordinance, we have to redo the ordinance. Then the one that's inactive, take a hard look at it and see.
We've been trying to note which ones are ordinance and some that should have been ordinance that were a resolution instead of an ordinance. And so we've been trying to kind of, as we come across those, note those too.
So I'd also like to look at ones that seem to have overlapping
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
purposes. Like I'm looking at like the Land Bank Authority, the Property Committee, the Public Facilities Authority. I'm not even sure what that is, but it seems like they kind of have overlapping missions and could be combined into an entity that kind of oversees all of those, because I know these things don't meet very frequently.
Solid waste, I always didn't understand why solid waste and keep Athens,
Beautiful.
keep Athens-Clarke County beautiful are separate.
Yeah.
Like, that could be a subcommittee of,
Yeah.
okay,
That were not set.
yeah.
Well, and note too that Keep Athens-Clarke County Beautiful was originally a nonprofit that we absorbed.
Yeah.
We know that the Public Facilities Authority, the Solid Waste Authority, those are set up, they only use when we need bond issues.
Right.
They've not been about 10 years, but they're there. In case you need, like, a waste landfill or expansion was done through the Public Facilities Authority, solid waste, I'm sorry. So there in case you need, some type of funding, but it's not to a data property committee, what building goes here and who goes in what building. That's not the purpose of that.
And to follow up on Ms. Jean's point, a lot of times, this is just kind of a rule of thumb. This isn't like a per se rule, but if you see the word authority in the name, usually that means there's some state law basis for it, whether it's in general law or whether it's in local legislation. So sometimes they have a very special mission that's defined under some legislation that's been passed by the General Assembly, whether that's general law or special local legislation, just so everyone's aware.
Okay.
So Chair, how would you like us to focus our work between now and the next meeting to bring you all?
It's a lot of stuff. Hold on. Cause you guys, it's a smorgasbord. But first, the process, cause that's our first iteration of this. Let's, real quickly, so we need to separate it, right?
Right, that's why I think we can get to the process, I think, separate it out in my mind. I could be wrong.
Okay.
That's why I asked them, okay, what are state authority that we know we have to have. Then was the mayor commission put together with through an ordinance or resolution, look at those, and then we come up, and we're making you the same process for all of them, but we'd like to see what that look like in my eyes, from a visual, they want to look at what that look like, then we can come up with a process.
So 3 things, so I'm hearing, now correct me. So we got, sorting out the BACs and the authorities that we have now, sorting them out. Those that can be changed, those are created by the mayor and all that. 2, process. The portal, FTP site, our attendance. I would really love to not be doing interviews all day. That's my big one. And 3, the stroke of a pen of how we can turn these into an ordinance. Did I get that right? How do we change the language? That, the training and all that stuff. Y'all get it? All right. So 3 things. So we can't do a general ordinance to correct them all. We'll have to do them all individually.
I think we could have an overarching ordinance that applies, like, for instance, to things like the absentee policy, which would be pretty general. Obviously, it would be challenging with entities that only meet like once a quarter because, these are not monthly groups, but I think we could certainly craft that kind of overarching legislation. There just probably is some more specific work that would be beneficial from a legal perspective, also likely from a policy perspective to do.
Okay.
As far as process, we'll get advertised this Friday for several vacancies, so the process is already set on those.
Okay.
How many vacancies we got?
Oh, I have to go back and look. I'm not sure.
Y'all check
Not as fast as we normally.
Check email.
Check your email.
Check it. I'll be sending some out Thursday afternoon to Friday morning, 1 or 2.
Any comments from staff? Other comments? Thank y'all for being here. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
I'll move adjourned. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Y'all have a lovely Monday.
Thank you, staff.
H&E.